India is really a star performer, and the latest figures for extreme poverty in India are now below 5%.
India's extreme poverty rate has declined.
This is an incredible achievement.
So I have a tough question. I'm looking at this as a race, right? India and China. There was a point in time where they both started from the same point. But today, China is 4 times, 5 times bigger than India in terms of the GDP.
Right now, India is growing at 7%. China is growing much below that. If things remain the same for the foreseeable future, well, the gap will slowly narrow. The real question is
it even worth living over here with the high taxes?
I'm going to be a little bit provocative. If you were to move to the US, would you have a maid? Would you have a driver? You know, your quality of life, actually, I would wager is probably better here because you are in that upper bracket than in a much wealthier country where you wouldn't be in that upper bracket. If you look at the rate at which women participate in the labor force in India, it's very, very low. So it's not that they're unemployed, they're not looking for work.
You are probably one of the best people out there who can predict the future because they're looking at the numbers. So 2047 in India, what could it look like?
Well, what I can tell you is that India for sure will be in the...
On today's episode, I'm going to ask all my questions about the reality of India. Is India really growing as fast as we're told in the news? And what can we expect for the future of India so that we can build a better life for ourselves? Welcome to the show, Aurélien. How are you doing today?
Very good. I'm very excited to be here and to be able to talk to your audience and to you.
So, Aurélien, you are the lead economist for India in the World Bank. Now, that's a very large title, right? Which a lot of people are like, what the hell is this job? So, what is it exactly that the World Bank does?
Yeah, so let me break it down really into the most the simplest terms, and then we can talk about it. But the World Bank is a bank, so it gives loans to countries. So it has shareholders that put in paid-in capital, and that capital is used to borrow money on the market at good interest rates because the bank has a AAA rating, and then lending it out concessionally to those countries and those clients that need it. How is that lending allocated? That lending is allocated to pursue 3 things. It's poverty reduction. That's always been our initial mandate, reduce extreme poverty in the world. And by the way, India is really a star performer in that respect. I don't know if you've seen, but the latest figures for extreme poverty in India are now below 5%. This is an incredible achievement. What our models tell us is that in a business as usual scenario, India will continue at its cruising altitude of, anywhere between 6-7% growth.
Okay.
And that's, by the virtue of compounding, right? The base upon which this 7% applies keeps getting bigger.
Yeah.
And now you have a rate of population growth of 1%.
Yeah.
So, your income is getting bigger, the rate of growth is high, and the population is not growing as fast as it used to.
Yeah.
So clearly, India will make it to higher middle income, and the country as a whole will be in the top 3 economies in the world. The second is shared prosperity. So that's the idea that you don't want to just eliminate the most extreme forms of poverty, but you want the lower segments of the population to grow and experience, wealth growth faster than those at the top. So you have an inclusive growth process that really lifts the bottom of the pyramid. And the third objective is a livable planet, because we need a planet to all get richer into for the foreseeable future. So these are the objectives. And then the way that we work is across both the public sector, so we lend to governments, and the private sector, where we lend to companies, and we lend to governments for specific programs that we think have the maximum chance of achieving the 3 objectives that I've mentioned before.
So essentially, if I have to break it down, so World Bank is actually a bank which has money from all the different countries, and they use that money to sort of lend money to other countries which are in need.
That's correct.
Right?
Exactly right.
So I have a tough question. I'm looking at this as a race, right? India and China. Now, obviously, the numbers speak for itself that the China is way ahead of India.
Mhm.
But there was a point in time where they both started from the same point. The starting point was same. When I mean starting point, I mean the GDP per capita of both the countries was same at one point of time.
Yeah.
But today, China is probably 10 times bigger than India, 4 times, 5 times bigger than India in terms of the GDP. And it's all a byproduct of the decisions and the policies that are taken by the governments of those countries. So what is your expert opinion on what has happened, considering that these are the facts?
So first of all, it's about 5 times, right? The size of the Chinese economy is about 5 times that of India, and since the population is roughly similar per capita, you also get this 1:5 ratio. There are many explanations about what led to this discrepancy. I was listening, in fact, to a conversation with Ruchir Sharma, who said that counterintuitively, you always expect communist or socialist countries to have much deeper, more extensive social programs, and the point that he was making is China was much more ruthlessly capitalist in a way, almost in a Dickens kind of way than one could imagine. He was saying at one point, 90 million people were laid off from public sector enterprise, and they just had to make do. So I keep thinking, the Chinese story, the Chinese development story is really about people leaving the farms and moving to the coast, moving to the cities and working in these big manufacturing enterprises in very tough conditions most of the time. Why don't you see the same thing happening in India? Why isn't that happening? In India, you still have 50% of the population living in rural areas, many of them in agriculture, and you haven't seen the development of that type of very labor-intensive, low-skill manufacturing that China was able to pull off. And one of the explanations, and I think it's a convincing explanation, is that in India you had a more social oriented system whereby people had access to social assistance, had access to workfare programs, had support to buy food. So you weren't compelled out of sheer necessity to, uproot yourself, live very far away from your family, working in conditions that, frankly, aren't conditions that one would want to work in. So, does that mean that India will take longer to get there than China? Probably. Is that something that we need to be that is a missed opportunity? I'm not sure. I think there is something to say about the social compact, right, that India has managed to achieve, about the democracy that India has managed to achieve, and you shouldn't downplay this. And it's a long game, right? So it's not because in the past, say, 20 or 30 years, China has grown faster that over time you won't end up in the same place or even potentially better. And that's really the real question. Right now, India is growing at 7%. China is growing much below that. If things remain the same for the foreseeable future, well, the gap will slowly narrow.
You feel that the gap will narrow between India and China?
Well, it is narrowing, right? You have on one hand a country whose population is, so the dependency ratio, the ratio of active to inactive, is much more favorable in the case of India.
What does that mean, ratio of active to inactive?
So basically, the composition of the population means that there are people who are of working age, so 15 to 65, and there's people who are like beyond that age who are no longer working, right? So what your economy produces has a lot to do with the share of the population that's active and the share of population that's inactive.
Correct.
And in China, the share of the population that's active is shrinking, and the share of the population that's inactive is growing. So you have fewer people producing for more people.
Okay.
In India, that ratio is still looking good. And in fact, the working age population is still increasing. So
Right.
you have more people producing for the total population. So you have this kind of demographic tailwind,
Right.
and you're growing at 7% when China is growing at a much lower rate than this. So yes, you're catching up. How long it will take? So the real question is, can you sustain this 7%? Can you do even better over time?
Right.
And that's where the whole middle-income country trap theme comes up, and we can
Right.
talk about this.
Right. So right now, India is in this middle income kind of a situation where the GDP per capita, correct me if I'm wrong, is $2,500-$3,000.
Yeah,
Right.
that's about
it. China's is about $12,000.
5 times.
5 times, right? $12,000. So right now we are in this middle income kind of a situation where there is a large number of people who are stuck in this middle class segment. Barely, maybe less than 1% of them have reached the HNI status, and still an overwhelmingly large number of people in the lower income group.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the current situation of the country. And what we have also observed is that larger the income inequality in the country, the harder it is for the country to grow, because then you have two different types of population to sort of cater with. And we always look at India as not as one India, as two different Indias, right? Because there are drastically different kinds of people living in India. So given our current situation, what is your expert opinion on how can we sort of change this into a developed country where our GDP per capita is $10,000, which is 5 times. So every Indian becomes 5 times richer going forward. One is obviously each one for themselves, where every person works for themselves and, try to become rich that way. But what can the government do to sort of enable that growth for 1.5 billion people?
Yeah. First, let's get the facts. The way we categorize countries, typically at the World Bank, in buckets is you have the low-income countries, then you have the lower middle-income countries, the upper middle-income countries, and then the high-income countries.
Sure.
India has moved from low-income to lower middle-income.
Okay.
Right? China is a higher middle-income country, and say the US is a high-income country. So this is, if you want, the arc of development. So
sure.
let's make an analogy that maybe will speak to your auditors and the people who follow you. It's a bit like a marathon. I'm not a runner, but I imagine how it is. So the first step is hard. The first step to get from low income to a lower middle income country, because your muscles are cold, you need to show up to the marathon, there's 1 million people around you, you're bumping into people, and then you really need to get into the spirit of the run, right? So that first step is hard to get from low income country to middle income country or lower middle income country. And in fact, many people don't manage to do it. I mean, many countries don't manage to do it. They remain stuck in a low income status.
So we've done a good job from going from lower income to lower middle income.
You've started the race, right? You've gotten out of the starting blocks. Yeah. You've pulled out of the 1 million people who are already in the beginning, and you're running. And that's the part where adrenaline kicks in. Your muscles are becoming warm. You're getting into the pace of the marathon. So
right.
What you see is that countries can progress fairly smoothly from lower middle income to higher middle income country.
Sure.
Right? But then comes that stage in the race where suddenly fatigue kicks in. Your muscles start cramping, and you're getting tired. The oxygen is getting scarcer, and then you have two choices. You can stay in the main group and just try to continue running, or you can say, I want to go to the podium, and I need to really maximize all the resources I have left, and really, really give it a push. And that's the countries that make it from middle income to higher income. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that, and that's the idea of the middle income country trap, is many countries have gone from low to lower middle income, from lower middle income to higher middle income, and have remained stuck there. And I can give you examples: Malaysia, Brazil, Mexico, South Africa, even Turkey. These are all countries that did well, but in the past 20 years, they remained in the middle income country category. Now, India is in the middle income country category, and the target it has set for itself, Viksit Bharat, by 2047 means that in the next 20 years, you want to graduate from lower middle income to higher middle income, which many countries have done. And, there's no reason India will not do it. But then the question is, can you make that next leap? Can you make the podium?
Yeah.
And that, experience shows that some countries have done it. I can give you examples.
Malaysia and Brazil, these are examples of upper middle income?
These are examples of countries that moved up from lower income to lower middle income and then higher middle income, but haven't managed to make it.
So they've also reached the upper middle income like China, these Brazil
exactly,
and Malaysia.
Yeah, but they haven't made the next step.
So who has done that? Any country which has moved from?
Exactly. So there's 3 categories of countries that have managed to do this in less than 20 years, right? In one generation. Okay. What India aspires to do.
Right.
There's the resource-rich countries, Saudi Arabia,
right.
For obvious reasons that are difficult to replicate. Then you have those countries of Eastern Europe, your Poland, for example, or Romania.
Poland has become higher income.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and the circumstances were particular. They had the kind of European Union bandwagon, right? To latch on to, and the proximity to these, and capabilities that weren't utilized under the kind of the USSR, but that were still there that could be reactivated. But there are countries that also didn't have that. Korea, Singapore. These are countries that in the span of a generation really managed to make that shift. And those countries usually did it by integrating deeply in international markets,
right,
and through exports. So, I've listed 3 types of situations: resource-rich, countries that latched on to the European Union bandwagon, and countries that really leveraged booming trades at a period of, hyperglobalization.
Right.
None of these things are available to India right now, but it just means that India will have to chart its own way.
So we don't have oil. We're not part of the European Union. Neither do we have something unique that the whole world wants in terms of
It's not
trade.
about something unique, but just the way in which global trade was growing, lifting all boats.
Right.
Korea didn't have anything unique. I mean, didn't have
electronics would have been.
Well, the funny thing is that in the 60s, the World Bank did an analysis of Korea and said, Korea, first of all, will never get rich, or is very unlikely to get rich. And if they should do something, it's agriculture. Okay. Please don't try manufacturing, right? So it's really hard to foresee, the future based on the past. We can use our models and we can say, look, this worked for country A, B, and C. But we're also confident that India has the scale, the resources, the resourcefulness to chart its own path.
So you mentioned that it's not just the responsibility of the government to make the economy grow, right? You say it's not fair to say that, okay, the government has not done this, done that. It's a very common narrative across the world, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not happy with the government. They're not doing this. Look at China, look at US. What are we doing? So what you mean to say is that it's also the equal responsibility of the citizens to contribute to the economic growth, right? So what can a citizen do to sort of build the country further, right? And while you explain this, can you give some case studies or examples of what other individuals did in other countries which actually helped that country grow?
So, first of all, I didn't mean to say that it's the responsibility of the people, but I meant to say that you should give credit to the people, right? Because Indians are working very hard. I mean, you look around you and people aren't sitting, around doing nothing. There's one thing that I think is important to realize. I've talked a lot about the investments that India as a country collectively has made, very wisely so, in education, in educating kids, in educating boys, in educating girls. And girls' attainment in education is actually big success story, right? So you have now parity, and in some respects, girls are doing better than boys. Today on the flight, we had a women pilot who was flying us. That's great. And you have a cricket team that it was recently in the news is doing very well. But if you look at the rate at which women participate in the labor force in India, it's very, very low. So depending on the figures, it's anywhere between a third, 40% of women of working age in India who participate. So it's not that they're unemployed, they're not looking for work. I'm not saying that women who would rather not work should. That's ultimately
right.
Everyone's choice, and that's the priority. But if there are things that are constraining women who would like to work from working, then that's where I think you have
I think that's
a missed opportunity.
Now, I think this primarily stemmed from the reason that the Indian patriarchal society did not really encourage women to work after marriage. But that's changing really fast now. So hopefully in the next few years, it creates another positive driver for India's growth.
So I don't think it's only norms, and values are also important. But childcare, elderly care.
Yeah.
Who's taking care of the kids?
Yeah.
But the kids eventually they grow and they leave the house, etc. But then you have the parents.
Yeah.
And sometimes norms move after, right? I mean, look, the Indian cricketers. Right, it has created a real positive story about what women can achieve, and an incentive for people to stop seeing this as a boys' sport and thinking, yeah, my girl can do this.
Right.
So norms change with success. So you need to have these success stories, and then the norms will change. So norms change. We shouldn't think of them as a very static, and we shouldn't think of it as Western, Eastern, or conservative versus modern.
Got it. So now, right now we are looking at India as a whole. Now I want to break India into two parts. Right? I don't really want to do it, but from an economic point of view, there is the rich Indians and then there is the middle class Indians. Right now, people actually also don't know what actually rich Indian means. Right? Today, earning 1 lakh a month in India is actually, from a entire India perspective, if I look at all 1.4 billion people, if you're earning 1 lakh a month, it's actually considered as rich. But the problem is, to earn 1 lakh a month, you need to live in big cities like Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, Hyderabad. And earning 1 lakh a month doesn't actually make you feel rich, right? It's actually, you actually feel poor because the cost of living is so high. It's probably as high as some of the developed countries out there, living in Mumbai and living in Bangalore. That's number one. Number two, the inflation that you look at for a country like India, probably you are quoting 5% inflation for India right now.
Oh, it's less than 5 now, yeah.
How much is it? How much is the exact number?
Oh, I think the latest inflation number was historically low, so we're well within the target range.
So probably, let's say 3 to 4% inflation is what you have calculated. But for people like me and the people watching here, anybody who is earning upwards of 1 lakh a month and living in the top 5 metro cities of India, they will disagree with you and say that it's not 3 to 4%. It's probably 10 to 15% inflation, because my cost of living is not dependent on the price of rice and rotis and all of that. It's dependent on how much is the price of food increasing on Swiggy and Zomato. How much are my movie tickets price increasing? How much are my flight prices increasing? How much are my tuition fees increasing in schools and colleges, which is increasing by 15-20% every year? How much are my hospital bills increasing if I have a kid? Now, because of that, people are not having enough kids, because if my cost of living is so high, I mean, firstly, they'll be like, is it even a good idea to have a kid? And even if I have a kid, not more than one, because having 2 kids is as good as saying I'm going to be bankrupt. And on the other side, there are also slightly richer Indians who are like, is it even worth living over here with the high taxes? Might as well just move to Dubai. So this is the reality of what's happening. I know this because I am in that particular income group, and I'm not alone. There are at least 5 crore Indians. That is the top 5% of India, but it is still a sizable population. What is your thought on this entire situation, which I just described? Did you know that this is happening? And what do you think we should be doing? Although I know it's difficult to empathize with us compared to the rest of India, but it is a real problem for people who are in this particular predicament.
So I find my daily life in Delhi much more charming than the daily life that I would have in Dubai.
If you say that, your daily
No,
life in
but
Delhi
it's
is
true.
charming.
Look, of course, I live in a nice part of Delhi, but my commute, I'm passing in front of, Lodi Garden.
Okay.
I can take a walk in Lodi Garden, see these magnificent, monuments. There's a beauty to the architecture that I didn't find in Dubai, for example. Dubai, to me, is much more monotonous, much more kind of cookie cutter than what I see.
Paris, the AQI right now in Paris is 400. 500.
Paris is unique. You cannot replicate Paris.
Yeah.
So
No, but if the air quality was that bad, what would the people say there? Like here,
do you know the tax rate in France? Because if you're complaining about high taxes,
right?
I mean, yeah. So people are talking about taxes, and a lot of the countries that you're thinking about, right? The U.S. is a particular case, but France, Germany, Sweden, Switzerland, very high tax rates, and that affords us a very nice quality of life. Why do you think that hospital or education is free? Well, because we're paying through taxes, right? So, we also need to be cognizant of the fact that
40% tax is what you guys pay. 40%.
About 40, yeah.
No, but then that's the point, right? Like as an Indian with my surcharges, I'm also paying around 38% tax. So my point, the thought in my head is I'm paying 38% tax. You're paying 40% tax. You're getting good air. I'm not getting good air. You're getting good infrastructure, free healthcare. I have none of those things. So what do I do? Like I need to also look at myself and my family.
Mm-hmm.
So one is obviously the country, but I can't stop the feeling of, hey, but family comes first, right? Like, do I stay here or do I need to figure out a better quality of life somewhere else? That's the conundrum in India right now. I know it's a tough question, but
no, it's an interesting question. But do you think that your ability, for example, to reach the audience that you're reaching, right? I mean, that's your business,
right?
Your model.
Yeah.
Your ability to connect to these people has to do with the fact that you're living here, right? That you're connecting with the same realities, that you're experiencing the things you're talking about.
Right.
Would you be able to do this outside of Dubai or Sydney or Paris? Probably not.
Probably not.
Maybe you would be doing something else, but you're also part and parcel of this society, and society is good to you in that way, right? And it's feeding your curiosity, your ability to connect and to make this happen. So, don't throw the baby with the bathwater is what I'm trying to say. And be hopeful that things are changing fast. I mean, look at the last 25 years. The size of the Indian economy grew 4 times.
The last 5 years?
25 years.
25 years, size of the Indian economy grew
4 times.
4 times.
In real terms, not in nominal terms, in real terms.
Right.
Real income per capita grew 3 times.
Okay.
Right? So these are massive changes in the span of a generation. Think about the next generation, right? So, it's coming.
So, Aurélien, let's take a couple of steps back.
Yeah.
The world has 180 countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you are obviously looking at the data. The World Bank is looking at the data of all of these countries to sort of understand what has been the economic growth of all of these various countries.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I had to ask you to sort of explain the current landscape of the world, what is actually happening, right? Because in the media, you're literally hearing about a tug of war kind of a race between China and the US, right? There's like a lot of politics which is going behind the scene. There's a lot of geopolitical tensions, a lot of economic wars being waged. So for the common man to understand in like 2 minutes what is happening in the world right now in 2025.
Yeah, so the first thing that I would say is what's happening today in 2025 is really, you have to put it in a trend. And the trend, let's take the turn, the 2000s, the 3 decades basically since 2000. So the 2000s, 2010s, 2020s. What we've seen is worldwide growth has been declining from one decade to the next. So growth has been declining, economic growth. Then trade growth has been declining. It's still growing, but the rate at which it's growing has been declining. FDI has been declining. You've had in this landscape right now, most developed economies are almost not growing. the US is doing a little bit better than most. Then you have developing countries that are really not doing very well. And then you have a few emerging markets that are doing very, very well and are pulling world growth. And that is China and India. It's not entirely surprising. China and India are both are each 1/6 of humanity.
Yeah.
So from a pure scale perspective, you would expect that. But if you see, for example, in 2025, the contribution to world growth of China was about 30%. The contribution of India to world growth was 20%. The contribution of the US to world growth was a little bit over 10%. But India and China alone contributed 50% of world growth in 2025. So you really have a story of, advanced economies that are still very wealthy but aren't growing very well. Then you have, developing economies that have really been struggling in recent years. And then you have these shining stars that have both, kind of now large economies, but also very high growth rates. And that's the story of...
Help me understand. You keep talking about growth, right? And you're saying growth has slowed down for the world. But except in India and China, the growth is still strong because they have a large population.
Yeah.
But you're from France, right? I've been to France, Paris. It's a beautiful place. You have the best hospitals, you have the best schools, everything is sorted. It's a developed economy. So why is it important for a place like France to keep growing? Because all these issues are already solved. Good roads, good hospitals, good healthcare, everything is free for everybody. All of these, benefits of life. The government is, giving all of these things for free to your citizens. So why is it important for a country to keep growing from there on?
Well, so I'll give you an answer from my World Bank perspective. So first of all, me as a World Banker, I'm not particularly worried about the growth rate of France per se, right? Because I think indeed, like you say, the margins to improve the quality of life are not as large as they are in many other parts of the world. But the world economy is important for developing countries too, right? Who does India trade with? It trades with the US, it trades with France. If you think of even the poorest countries, those commodity rich countries, when the world economy is booming, the price of commodities goes up and their terms of trades improve.
Yeah.
Right? So, the health of the world economy and the health of the developed nations, they're also the largest economies in the world collectively. Well, this has a lot of importance for the ability of developing countries to tag on to this and to access these markets and access these sources of dynamism.
As an incentive for the developing country to do relations with the developed country to bring the wealth to their country.
Exactly.
I understand that. But
it's much easier to do if those countries are doing well. So, for example, what has been one of the most glaring and really dramatic developments lately, you see that as growth is slowing down in advanced economies and they have to make tighter budgetary decisions, budgetary adjustments, official aid to the poorest nations has gone down a lot, right? We've seen how, for example, development assistance in the form of humanitarian assistance, for example, has fallen quite dramatically. And, that is a concrete, practical consequence of developed nations having to make tougher choices and tight adjustments. Ultimately, people, even in rich countries, still want a better life. And when things are not progressing as fast as they would, then they focus more on themselves and less on the rest of the world.
Got it. So for a developed country, it's like you don't really care about their growth because they're already sorted. And now it's about how can they do business with the smaller countries which are trying to catch up, so that
is my perspective as a world banker. I'm sure there are people who are concerned about the fact that even in wealthy economies like the US, like France or Japan, you still have poverty, you still have discrimination, you still have things that need to get better, and everything becomes easier when the economy is growing.
Right.
So I'm sure there are people who are concerned and working on this. It's not my preoccupation because our mandate at the World Bank is to look at those countries that need to catch up with the frontier.
Got it. So now let's come to the rising stars that you mentioned,
Mhm.
China and India.
Yeah.
Now, I have a contrarian opinion. I feel India will never be a superpower like China. Change my mind.
Well, I would ask you a question. Why do you want India to become a superpower like China?
Why?
First of all, does it matter to be a superpower? Right? What do we care about? So for me, from my perspective, again, as a world banker, I'm not about, superpower, not superpower. I'm about making sure that the economy delivers for people, right? So to me, I don't see things in relative terms as in, one country should be above another or one country should be number one. I'm just thinking, okay, what's going to deliver the best outcomes for the population? So if that's what you mean by India becoming a superpower, then yes, but I'm not looking in relative terms. And I think there is this tendency sometimes to see the world economy as a zero-sum game, right? You need someone to go down for you to go up as a relative thing. And it's not the case. That's exactly what we're talking about before. Everyone does better when everyone does well. That's really the bottom line.
I'll give you one example where I feel that's not true. So in the US, during COVID, the US printed money like there's no tomorrow. Now you might automatically think that overprinting will lead to inflation and their citizens will suffer. But what ended up happening is because the US is such a superpower and it has so many trade relations with so many different countries, it ended up exporting inflation to India. So the overprinting of dollars in the US actually affected an Indian. So my argument is being a superpower actually makes sense because if a country I can do that, I can print money, my citizens, nothing happens, and a third world country is suffering because of me.
So I would qualify what you're saying in a few respects. First, the position of the US and the position of the dollar is very, very particular, right? And no country has a similar type of power. But also keep in mind that there has been inflation in the US and there has been a tightening of monetary policy that has affected the US and the rest of the world for that matter. So I would qualify the fact that it was a free ride that the Americans were able to enjoy. And in fact, if you see in the politics in the US right now are very much about the cost of living.
But they enjoyed it for a while, right?
Well, the end of the very low interest rate period that we used to know before COVID has to do with fears about inflation, not just obviously about loose monetary policy. There was, the breakdown in supply chains and many different factors that contributed to it. But I don't think it's accurate to say there was no inflation issue in the US. It was minimized by the fact that there was a strong correction through a tightening of monetary policy that we've all felt.
So you are probably one of the best people out there who can predict the future because they're looking at the numbers. So 2047 in India, can you paint a picture for the audience? What could it look like?
Well, what I can tell you is that India for sure will be in the top 3 world economies.
For sure. Top 3.
Absolutely. There is no doubt about it. So that I can predict with certainty unless, calamity happens, AI takes over the world and destroys humanity. India will do very well. The question is not whether it will do good, but whether it will do exceedingly well, above and beyond expectations. And that's really...
so what you're saying is the upper middle income is an absolute certainty.
There's no doubt about it.
No doubt about it. Which is about $10,000 per GDP per capita, which is basically where all of us are going to be 5 times richer.
Yeah.
But how certain are you about us becoming that next South Korea or becoming that next UAE, where we actually become high income and reach the $20,000-$25,000 GDP per capita and become that rich?
Well, that's really the million or the $1 trillion question in the case of India. And the way we break it down is we're looking at the various factors that drive growth, right?
Yeah.
And it's actually pretty simple when you think about it. It's labor, how many people work, how well they work. It's capital, how much capital you're able to deploy to build infrastructure and how efficiently you're deploying it. And it's what economists call total factor productivity, which is just the efficiency with which you combine labor and capital to.
Okay. Labor efficiency and capital efficiency. How
So
both of
it's
these things
the
are.
amounts of labor, the amounts of capital, and then how efficiently you use these factors of production to
So we have
create
both.
output.
India has both. We have capital,
So-
we have labor.
So you have a lot of labor, right? But like I said, a lot of it is not employed, right?
A lot of them are in the farms.
Well, a lot of them are either not working, not because they're unemployed, but because they're not participating in the labor force, and that has to do with the role of women and their ability to participate in the economy. And then we usually also look at the quality of the labor force, right? And that has a lot to do with education, with skills, and this needs to keep upgrading, right? So for example, India is doing very well in or has made a lot of progress in terms of expanding access to education, but the quality, the relevance of education is still something that can improve a lot. And then total factor productivity, it's a very hard thing to capture, but the way that you can increase the productivity of your economy is in several ways, right? I mean, one way is by moving people from relatively unproductive activities to relatively productive activities. And typically the way it happens is by moving people away from the farm and into more productive segments.
Like what China did with
of the economy.
farming to manufacturing.
Exactly, right? And India still has quite a way to go, and there's really a question mark of how that is going to happen.
Because still half of the population is stuck there.
Still half of the population, I wouldn't say stuck, but is in agriculture and in a type of agriculture that's very small scale, that's very retail, and that's not as productive as it could be. So one of the big agendas that we're trying to promote at the World Bank is what we call AgriConnect, which is also about agribusiness, which is trying to think of not really only how you move people away from agriculture and into other activities, but how you can make the agriculture itself more productive, more linked to value creation in rural areas. So one of the models that India is very famous for is Amul, right? So the aggregation of small producers in cooperatives, so that you can still retain the nature of the small farmer or small producer in the rural areas, but reach these scale economies through aggregation and the quality kind of standards that you want to be.
So fragmented workforce, but optimized in a manner that creates a larger output, like what I'm.
That's exactly correct. And then doing also a lot more transformation, right, in the rural areas, and that means investing, of course, in the rural infrastructure, the logistics, the cold chains, the storage that allows you to move up in a way the agricultural value chain, and also diversify the types of things that you can do. Then the other way that you can increase productivity is within firms. So in India, you've seen productivity hasn't been bad, but it's been very, very much driven by leading sectors. And by that, I mean, the manufacturing enclaves of excellence, that's, like your pharma, or even two-wheelers. If you go to Europe now, you see Royal Enfields, and the new Mahindras. I've driven one recently. They're fantastic, right? So there's manufacturing excellence, and then, of course, IT and the modern services. So these sectors have been experiencing incredible productivity growth, but they're not employing a lot of people.
Right.
The sectors that are employing a lot of people is the MSMEs, and those haven't experienced the same type of productivity growth. So how to make these segments of the economy more productive is important. Then the final point that I'll say is and the Korea example is really enlightening. You get a lot of productivity benefit from integrating into the world economy.
Yeah.
And that's not, people think about trade as mostly, trade is just a way to sell my products, sell more products.
Right.
And a lot of Indians would say, well, we have a huge domestic market. We don't really need, the rest of the world. We can achieve scale. We can achieve specialization in our domestic market. But what people, I think, fail to appreciate is that integration into global markets comes with knowledge transfer, come with ideas exchanges, comes with managerial experience that gets transferred, comes with exposure to competition, to more sophisticated clients, to more sophisticated products, and you get a lot of productivity gains from interacting with the rest of the world, much beyond what you get by just having a bigger pool of customers.
Right.
So what I would say is, the world has shifted in terms of the overall attitude and willingness to contemplate, very unimpeded and very free trade. But really, let's not throw the baby with the bathwater again. There's really a lot to say about participating in trade and global value chains to make your own economy much more efficient.
So just to summarize the entire conversation in one line, you're like, India is the place to be. If you want to experience the most economic output for you across the world, India is in the perfect vantage point as of now in 2025 for you to build the most economic wealth if you are able to harness it and leverage it the most efficient way.
I would definitely say that India is one of the most exciting places to be right now. It's true for you in your line of business. It's true for me in my line of business as an economist, as a development economist, because it's moving very fast. It has a lot of potential, a lot of promise. So it's really a very exciting place to be, for sure.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this wonderful discussion, Aurélien. I think this was a fantastic discussion on everything about the world. We started from macroeconomics. We started looking at what really makes a country a superpower. What can India do to get there? And finally talking about what can the future of the world look like for every person living in India. Thank you so much for the work that you do. I'm sure India will continue to keep growing as per your predictions. And if that continues, then we're all going to be rich. So thank you so much, guys, for watching till the end. If you have any feedback or any kind of doubts or questions that you had in this entire conversation, something that you agreed with or did not disagree with, I would love to know what you did not agree with. So please put that in the comment section down below. So I would love to read every single one of them. And please drop any future guest recommendations that you want us to bring, because we will bring them to you on our exclusive channel. Thank you so much, guys. On that note, I'll see you in the next one. Before you go, guys, if this episode gave you even one insight that made you think differently about money, don't just keep it to yourself. Share it with your friend or family member who could use it too. And if it sparked a new thought or even made you disagree with me, drop a comment below and tell me why. Your critique helps me make these conversations sharper and more useful for you. As long as you have me subscribed, I'll make sure that you walk away with at least one new thing every Wednesday.